Hi, I'm Nina McVeigh with Bernina of America, and welcome to Bernina Creative Studio, where today I will be teaching you how to do feathers. Really. I think that once somebody learns how to free motion, most of the time we all aspire to do feathers. And I'm here to tell you that if we break it down, we'll be able to do it. There are spines and there are plumes, and that's what we're going to learn to do today. But when we look at feather styles, there are so many. There's open feathers, bump back feathers, circular feathers, on and on. Just go to Pinterest and you'll see so many different kinds. But today we're going to break it down to 3 different styles of feathers. The first style that we're going to do is going to be done with rulers. So if you can do ruler work, you'll be doing feathers from the time the needle hits the fabric. What I think is important is that we look at some resources. One of them is Natalia Boner's book on feathers, free motion quilting feathers. I think it's a good resource for you to have when you begin making feathers. And then, of course, because we are doing ruler work feathers, we are going to be using every feather spine and every feather plume sets of rulers from Good Measure by Amanda Murphy. We're going to begin with our feather ruler, and before we can do that, let's talk about your machine setup. I have my straight stitch throat plate on. My feed dogs are lowered because, again, we're free motion quilting. I have a ruler foot on my machine, so it's the adjustable ruler foot number 72. And I am using the set of Amanda Murphy rulers. If you notice here, we have one ruler for the plume, which is the center of the feather. I'm sorry, the spine, which is the center of the feather. And then we have 5 different sizes of plumes, and we have one for the right and one for the left. So if I take my feather, which I already have one here, I put my fabric underneath the foot. I'm going to start with making the spine. Begin by pulling your thread up. As far as thread, generally, especially for a beginner a beginner making feathers, I don't want the thread to be the focus, and I don't want you to see it real well. So I would tell you that if you had a matching thread, even a lightweight thread, like a 60 weight thread might be ideal for that. So I've got my my needle down and my foot down. And I'm just hooking this ruler on the foot, and I'm going to stitch to the end of the curve until my foot rests in that next groove. I'm now going to take the ruler and turn it the opposite direction. So there I have my nice curved spine. Just going to get rid of some of these threads. I am going to start where I ended, so let me sink my needle. I'm going to take my plume, and the nice thing about these rulers is they have a surface on the back, which is a non-skid surface. Sometimes, however, when I'm at a sit-down machine, like our domestic machine, I like just a little bit more grip on the back. So I'm going to stitch my first plume, and it's really kind of I don't want to say a guess about what size you're going to use, but just an experiment, I guess. And the first plume is going to be done first, and it's going to be done with the front edge of my ruler foot against the bottom of the plume. And I'm going to stitch around that plume, come around until my needle hits the spine. From here on in, all the rest of the plumes will be done in sets of 2. So I'm going to put this against my foot so that I can see part of the plume that I just did. And this time I am starting so that my foot is against the top part of the plume. I'm going to come around, and when my needle hits that first plume, I'm going to backtrack. But because I'm using a ruler, and provided it hasn't slipped, it's going to backtrack in exactly the same path. And then I'm just going to move my ruler up, and I can tilt it. I like different angles of the plumes, makes it look a little more feathery. And I'm going to come around until I hit the spine again. Now I'm going to travel up the spine, and I can use a different size plume if I'd like. I just want to make sure that I can see my previous plume in the window, or it's sticking up, so that I know when I come around, I am actually going to be hitting the previous plume. Bump back or stitch back the end of that feather, and then move up. And come around the top. Move up your spine a little bit. Do the middle-sized one again. Come around. Move back. Move up. And come back around. So I'm just going to turn this so you can see that that feather is developing so nicely. And it's so perfect because it's done with rulers. So I need to travel. And if you're nervous about traveling and don't feel comfortable, don't forget that that spine was done with a ruler. So you could always lay a ruler back down to stitch again, to move up the spine. That was kind of a little one, so I think I will try a bigger one here. Part of the other thing you're going to have to do with your domestic machine is you are in control of your stitch length. So you're going to have to also get used to moving your fabric at an even rate of speed and having your machine stitch at an even rate of speed that gives you the desired stitch length. And this has been so exciting for people because they were never able to do a feather, and now they can. And when you get to the top, I actually angle this top plume so that as I come back around, let me just show you here, as I come back around, I am eyeballing so that the end of my spine is 1/4 of an inch away from my ruler, so I actually go right back into the spine. And then from here, you are going to backtrack, and again, if you're not real comfortable with that, you can always put your spine ruler back on. Whoops, I was actually just following the spine. But you can definitely use that ruler to guide you. And now I'm going to take the other plume ruler and put it on the other side. And remember, I'm going to do my first plume, and now I'm going to do them in pairs again. And I can keep going up that side, but I am actually going to take this out. And you can see the feather that's already been stitched. And that's feathers with rulers. Now that we've done feathers with rulers, we're going to move on to free motion feathers. And as I said, there are lots of styles we're going to do, and we're going to show you two different styles. One will be a no backtrack feather, and one will be a bump back feather. We're going to look at the no backtrack feather first. And like everything else in free motion, you'll get better with drawing. And I would say draw and draw and draw. I think I drew feathers for 2 years. Doesn't mean you have to spend that amount of time, but I'm still drawing feathers just because I just like to keep that muscle memory. So our feather has the spine and the plume. So I'm going to first draw, just like I would stitch, I'm going to draw my spine. When I put my first plume on for this no backtrack feather, and it is exactly as the title would indicate, there's no backtracking. And that's what makes this a relatively easy feather. I'm going to make kind of a sideways C until the end of it is pointing towards the spine. And then I'm just going to echo that curve back to the spine. So that's my first plume. As I go up, I just point to the spine and back out. Point to the spine and back out. They can touch or not, kind of up to you. But if you remember, when you come around your curve, point to the spine. Now again, as I come around, I don't want you to have to do any backtracking if that's difficult for you. So when you come back down the spine, instead of trying to stay right on the line, go ahead and purposely not stay on the line. Just kind of echo that line. And now we're going to start on the other side. Faces the spine, come up, face the spine. And if you really get good at this and you want to do a variation, you might want to come over and do a little circle. And that will give that feather a totally different look. Or you might want to come up and make a hook, and when you come back this way. And that's kind of a ribbon feather. And then when I get to the top, I'll do a curlicue because everything's better with a curlicue. Okay, so now that you've practiced drawing, we're going to stitch it. And again, I would practice this over and over and over again when you're talking on the phone, when you're sitting in front of the TV, whenever. So when we come to the machine, I'm going to start at the top with my spine. I'm going to pull out my bobbin thread. So I know where that is. And I'm simply going to stitch A gentle curve for my spine. And now I'm going to make that C, points to the spine, and come back. Come up, point to the spine, and come back. If you have to travel up the spine a little bit, that's fine. But the end of your plume comes around and points to the spine. So you don't have to worry about backtracking. So we come back around to the top. I've got my threads, so I want to make sure that I cut those so that I don't stitch over them. Into my spine. And as I said, you don't have to follow right on the line. Just kind of echo that. And then again, on the other side. And your first feather may not be perfect. And that's okay. Imperfection is okay. And you'll just get better and better as you do it. At the top. I could end my feather here if I wanted to, but like I said, everything's better with the curlicue. And so there we have our no backtrack feather. Now that we've done the ruler feather and the no traceback feather, we're going to do what's called the bump back feather. And it's a really common feather that's done. It's what we see in heirloom type feathers. But again, it all starts with drawing. And we're going to draw our spine first. I think one of the most important parts of doing a feather is to make sure that you get this first plume shaped correctly and that it's laying correctly, not up and down next to the spine, but out a little bit, and there's a slight curve to it. So I'm going to do that one. This is really very much like the ruler work feather without rulers. So now I'm going to go up the spine a little bit around until I touch the first plume, and I'm going to trace back. I'm going to bump back around the curve, and then I'm going to make my next feather. Travel up the spine a little bit, come around, bump back, travel up, come around, bump back, travel up, come around, bump back. Even if you have to say those words to yourself as you're drawing. Come around, bump back, travel, come around, bump back. Now I can come down the spine like we've seen, or another way to get back to the bottom is to echo around the outside. So that's just another way to get back down to the bottom, because you always want, well, I always want to come back to the bottom because I am best at going from the bottom up. Come around till you touch the plume, bounce back. And then because I did echo that side, I would of course want to echo this side. But you're going to draw that over and over again. As I said, when you're watching TV, when you're waiting for kids after school, if you're picking kids up, if you're waiting for your appointment at the dentist office, I always carry paper and pencil with me. And when you do this type of drawing, always try and do it without raising the pencil off the paper, because that's what you have to do here at the machine. We're now ready to take it to the machine and stitch out our feather. I've been using the 72 ruler foot, but for obvious reasons with the ruler feather, but with other free motion feathers, it might not be as visible as you want or lend you as much visibility. So I am using the number 24 free motion embroidery foot. So again, I'm going to start at the top of my feather and pull up my thread. I haven't talked about securing your threads at all, but you know, that's a quilter preference. But if you want to secure here, you would take a few little stitches. Go ahead then and stitch your spine. And then I'm going to go up and trim that thread. Boy, I didn't do a very long spine, so I'm just going to continue. So now I'm going to do that first plume. And the first plume, as I said before, is really important because it's kind of the setting of all the shapes of your other plumes. So it's important that you get a nice shaped plume, like almost a teardrop shape. And now I'm going to travel up the spine a little bit, around to the side, let it touch, bounce back on the end of the feather, plume, come over, up the spine, bounce back. Bounce back, and what I would tell you is if you don't bounce back right on the line, keep going. Don't let that bother you. That will come. And honestly, I don't think it would be that noticeable if you were using a lightweight thread. And you're the one who's noticing it, but most people wouldn't. So don't be hard on yourself, just keep going. So I stitched down my spine, and now I'm going to do my other side. And you can see that a free motion feather is certainly much faster than a ruler feather. And you can really create your own feather shape if it's free motion. When I get to the top of my feather, I'm just going to do a straight up plume. I will remove this from the machine. And there you have your bounce back feather. Now that we've stitched out 3 different styles of feathers and we've learned the feather techniques, I hope you'll go home and practice. I hope you've enjoyed this BERNINA Creative Studio. Thank you so much for joining us.